This player got killed over an own goal. 2 players lost their lives due to a lightning strike on the field. And a whole team vanished in a plane crash. Colombia had a killer team back in the 90s with players like Higuita, Rincon, Valderrama, Asprilla, and a bunch of other stars. But one of those talents never played football again after scoring an own goal. On June 22, 1994, Andres Escobar scored an own goal that paved the way for a 2-1 loss to the United States, knocking the Colombian national team out of that year's World Cup. Even though the whole team played poorly, Colombian fans directed all their fury at the defender. But that hatred went way too far. Andres was shot in a parking lot and sadly passed away. This case has been under investigation for years, but they never uncovered the real motive behind the crime. In the 90s, Colombia was tied to drug trafficking, and one of the most common illegal activities at the time was betting, especially on football games. Since the Colombian team was one of the favorites for the Cup, a lot of people bet that they would do well. And when the team got knocked out in the group stage, a lot of folks lost big money. The thing is, some of those folks were pretty dangerous, and well, it's not hard to connect the dots to figure out what went down. 10 days after the elimination, 3 people tied to these illegal activities took Andres' life in that parking lot. But that's nothing compared to what happened to Iker Casillas during a training session that ended his career. The goalie is just legendary. He's got a ton of records, won Champions League, multiple La Liga titles, and even a World Cup as captain. But on May 1st, 2019, something tragic went down. The goalie was training as usual at Porto's training ground when he started feeling intense chest pains. A medical team was called in quickly, and they found out Casillas was having a heart attack. He was rushed to the nearest hospital, where doctors began surgery. Fans worldwide were on edge. The survival odds were low, and any medical mishap could have been fatal. Thanks to the efforts of all involved pros, Casillas managed to pull through. But this incident would leave deep scars on the player, affecting his life forever. He wanted to help Porto become a European giant again, but that dream was tragically cut short. The doctors told Casillas he couldn't play football professionally anymore. That was a real shock for the goalie. He even tried to get back to training, going against the doctor's advice, but it just didn't work out. In 2020, he announced on social media that he was retiring from football. But nothing compares to the biggest football accident. An entire team just vanished because of it. We're talking about Chapecoense, a Brazilian club that went down in history for a dark reason. That's not what the fans had in mind before everything happened. They were about to play their first ever international final, the 2016 Copa Sudamericana final against Atlético Nacional. That team was enchanting South America. And then tragedy struck. The plane carrying members of the technical staff, journalists, and the players simply plummeted from the sky. The entire city of Chapeco, which was eagerly awaiting the event, woke up to the sad news that the entire Chapecoense team had simply disappeared. The search began, and soon the plane was found, completely destroyed in the middle of a forest. Later, it was discovered that the plane had crashed due to a fuel shortage. In other words, there wasn't enough fuel for the engines. It was all due to the lack of planning by the airline responsible for the flight.
Imperdoável, na verdade imperdoável. Esse avião não caiu, ele foi derrubado.
Isso envolve uma operação realmente não considerada segura.
Tudo errado, né? Desde o planejamento do plano de voo até as atitudes tomadas durante o voo, né?
Com tudo isso de errado que ele fez, ele ia ter que pagar uma multa, por isso que ele não declarou que estava sem combustível. Multa essa que ia quebrar a companhia porque a multa é vultuosa.
The only survivors were players Alan Ruschel, Nito, and Jackson Follman, journalist Rafael Hensel, and flight attendants Jimena Suarez and Erwin Tumiri. Of the 3 players, only Alan Ruschel tried to return to playing, but he wasn't successful. After a long recovery period, he did manage to play again wearing the Chapecoense jersey, which was an emotional moment for football history. But months later, all the trauma related to the crash prevented him from focusing on football and led him to give up his passion. All the other 71 people on board the plane lost their lives. This accident not only shattered the fans' dreams, but also completely destroyed the club, which never managed to assemble a squad capable of repeating the achievements of that team. Obviously, thousands of tributes were made, including by big clubs in Europe, but the biggest tribute came from Atlético Nacional, their opponent in that final. Initially, they were awarded the tournament trophy because they simply didn't have an opponent. But in the end, they decided to give the trophy to Chapecoense, along with the prize money so the club could rebuild.
Neto, Alan Ruschel e Follman se emocionaram com o apoio dos torcedores. A taça de campeão da Copa Sul-Americana do ano passado foi entregue e causou comoção na Arena Condá.
Another player lost his life because of football. Look at what happened to Christian Benitez. He arrived in Qatar in 2013, but his time in Arab football turned out to be much shorter than expected. He had built his career in Colombia and England, and went to Qatar to secure his future. But just a day after making his debut for his new club, the striker was admitted to the hospital with severe abdominal pains after a training session. That training was the last time the player set foot on the pitch. On July 29, 2013, Benitez passed away due to a cardiac arrest. But this player's case is even sadder. The Indomitable Lions, as the Cameroon national team is known, were in a great moment in football. But during the semi-finals, in the Cameroon versus Colombia match of the 2003 Confederations Cup, tragedy struck. During the 1-0 victory, midfielder Marc-Vivien Foé collapsed on the field. The autopsy revealed that he passed away due to a hereditary heart problem. The worst part is that the coach wanted to take him out of the match, but Foé refused to leave, and minutes later the tragedy occurred. The midfielder was only 28 years old when his heart failed him. Despite the tragedy, their team managed to reach the final where they lost to France. On the podium, all the athletes paid tribute to Foé by wearing his former teammate's number 17 jersey. You probably never heard of this player, but he would have been a star. The young Shishmarev, only 23 years old, was one of the few Russian prospects and sadly passed away for a very strange reason. During a friendly match, the young goalkeeper suffered a blow after colliding with a player from the opposing team. A clash between players, which is a normal thing, turned into something tragic in his case. The impact caused the goalkeeper to choke on his own tongue, and despite the medical team's rescue efforts and over an hour of trying, he couldn't be saved and passed away. There's only one case stranger than this. In Colombia, 2 players died because of lightning. One of them was the midfielder known as Carepa, who died immediately on the field and who had played in the 1994 World Cup in the United States, even scoring a goal in Colombia's 3-1 victory over Switzerland. The other victim was Giovanni Cordoba, who was gravely injured and passed away after 3 days in the hospital. The lightning strike caused an electrical discharge across the entire field, and the tragedy could have been much worse. According to Deportivo Cali's president, Humberto Arias, the electrical discharge was so severe that it injured 5 other players. This is definitely one of the biggest tragedies in football history.